This conference will now be recorded.
All
There are
right, so
several people in the chat saying they can't see the slides.
the slides. All right, so let's see. Are the well, again, I can't see everybody that's in attendance here. I don't know who said that they could not see the slides, but what you should see is just a plain generic slide that says league session.
So there is the GoToMeeting viewer, right? And then there's actually the behind the webcam view. If you minimize those webcams, you'll see the screen. There's a lot of information going in the chat that says you have to hide webcams.
Oh, I see.
Right now, don't worry, it just says league session and has our logo up.
Well, it looks like someone got
Yes.
it to work. Okay.
All righty. So now
I
it's
see.
recording. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Next slide, please. All right. So as we look to how we're going to develop, I think it's important for us to realize that a 5-year plan and the plans that we look to implement are there for us to manage our growth. Lacrosse is certainly growing in the area, and we need to be able to understand how that growth and the development of the game in the area is going to impact you, and then of course what you would like to see from us to impact that growth. Again, these slides are all going to be available to you, but what I'm trying to present to you is the general concept that we do truly want to listen to what you have to say with regard to how our league expands and grows. And then of course, the end game is we want to provide the best possible lacrosse experience for the families and the kids that are playing the game. So again, we listen to you, and this is what we this is how we go about gathering that information. Okay, Laura, next slide.
Sure.
All right, so this is where Laura takes over, and I will move. Okay. Well,
Thanks, Steve. If you can't hear me, just go ahead and put it in the chat and I'll try to work on my audio so it's easier for you to understand. First things first, we have the Safe Sport Act of 2017. We recently started the actual certification process that many of your coaches went through last year. This is a federal law, and with U.S. lacrosse moving towards being an Olympic sport, we are required to complete this training. Now, many of you voiced your opinion that it was very cumbersome for coaches. It took a lot of time, and so, but it is necessary. So we also have some of the other pieces of that Safe Sport Act, which are, we have an athlete-coach interaction policy. It's very lengthy, but it goes over a lot of things that your coaches or administrators could possibly face when working with young adults. There's also a social media best practices that we have for you, and we've also developed the athlete safety reporting form. So now that we've been into almost 2 years of this, how are your clubs dealing with this topic? Do you feel like you're adequately supported? Is there anything that you would want from the league in order to implement this a little easier? So with that, I will unmute you all. And if anybody would like to chime in, I'd appreciate your feedback. Or you can just put it in the chat, that's fine too. Going once. Oh, somebody's typing.
I'd like to add something.
Go ahead, name.
This is Richard Yee, so with Santa Cruz. So I think this is a great program. I think that it's a good and not point to pass on to the parents that our coaches are trained, and I think this is a good differentiator, or is a good selling point, if you will, for lacrosse, and that we take these things seriously and we train our coaches. And I think it's a great program, regardless of the hurdles or the additional effort that it takes to get this thing done.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds like it's working for you guys. That's good. All right. Our next, if you do have additional comments and we move on from a topic, feel free to put it in the chat, or next time that we open it up for discussion, add it in there.
Hey,
Laura, I'll add on. This is Casey Nissen with Pleasanton. I agree. I think it's important. It is time consuming as someone who's coached for years. The one challenge for like continuing coaches, and this could be something as a program I think we started to do this year, is some of the requirements are not like once you take it once, you don't necessarily have to do it again, or it's every other year. So just having those dates available of when we took something last time. So as a coach, like I don't have to dig through old emails and try to figure out when I took something that I don't necessarily need to do again. So that would be one recommendation. I don't know if NCGLA keeps a master spreadsheet and they could give that back to club, so we have that information, or that could be something done on the club level. I think we started to do that this year, but that was one challenge. But other than that, I would say it's good training, and I think it's important as well.
Okay, yeah, Dan, the webmaster, does have those certification dates that you guys submitted the previous year, and so you can always email him and ask for those coach certification spreadsheets with that information, so you don't have to go looking for it. Definitely can. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll dive more into the, like the coach certification requirements. I just wanted to check and make sure that when it comes to educating your parents on this topic, that US Lacrosse and NCGLA were giving you the tools to do that. The next topic is our scholarship program. Currently, we reimburse our clubs up to 50% of what they give out. There's a 10% cap, and our applications are due in January, well, end of January specifically. Some of the feedback that you guys have already provided was that, the majority of you are not able to host your, fundraisers for the year, or you had to give reserves back to some of your players, and you just weren't able to build up those reserves this year. And then some of you just said, flat out, we most of the time do not have funds to pay up front, and so you felt that the scholarship program was favoring those more affluent or larger clubs that could float those funds. So some of the items that came out of the phone call in terms of adjustments to the scholarship program were, maybe moving the application date so that you know how much funding you have before you have to register a team, making sure that if you were getting a player scholarship, that they were actually registered on a team in the league, and then possibly looking at expanding the 10U team scholarship to be need-based rather than, to be like new, because that is an area that a lot of the clubs already have teams, but they want to continue to have them. Also, Some of you said that, you really didn't want an invoice credit. You wanted to know how much you were working with to start with. And some of you said, the program that we have right now works great for our club. We figured it out, and we'd like to see a portion of that still remain. So with that, are there any comments or additional feedback in regards to scholarships?
Laura, I could maybe speak on that.
I think that was Kevin.
Yeah. I mean, maybe just from seeing people's feedback, maybe there's just, it doesn't have to just be one type of scholarship, like the 50%, the one that I have now. Speaking for an organization that did the ground up work, and I think a lot of people have done it too, and that those beginning years, getting funding is really key. So maybe there's a special section that if in your first 3 years of an organization, you could apply for a grant or some scholarship assistance that helps with like team registration. I know the old, when I say old, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there used to be a scholarship that you got 50% off your official fees, and that greatly helped Oakland lacrosse in its beginning years. So I think not having a one size fits all scholarship application, but perhaps a couple different types, so it can meet the vast and varied needs of all the organizations.
Okay.
This is Derek. I think that from Alameda Lacrosse, I think that first bullet is really is key for us, because our dates are always pushed very much later, just due to other sports and schools and things like that. So a later date would actually really help, because it's a bit early for us at this point. So that later time would be very helpful.
Okay. Anything else around scholarships or grants? I mean, we obviously have ones from other organizations, but specifically, what the NCGLA provides.
I have a question.
Sure.
To what extent does U.S. Lacrosse provide any support for us in growing the game and providing scholarships, equipment scholarships, and those kinds of things to help new players deal with the high cost of joining the sport?
The equipment scholarships, which ones are there?
But any kind of assistance that comes from us.
Yes, there are. And actually, I have some time devoted to the NorCal chapter and US Lacrosse to discuss those. And Lynn Porterfield is actually on the phone right now with us, and from US Lacrosse, she's our regional rep, and she is going to dive into that stuff a little bit later, if that's okay. But they definitely have equipment ones.
Great, thank you.
All right. If you have anything else with scholarship, let us know. I believe the board will be taking a look at that pretty quickly. So we welcome your ideas. Our next one is, let's see here, our roster submission process. So we've been submitting rosters to the league for a while, and we've discovered we have some issues. I'll just put it mildly. Most of you use the push feature in League Athletics to submit it. We have some very complex rules for our roster, but we feel that they're all necessary to keep it fair and safe for everybody, and reduce the risk for the clubs. Current trend, even though we have that, some of you are still choosing to not use League Athletics, and you're uploading your roster template manually, which is totally okay. But we are seeing an increase in what we like to call some dirty data. And that isn't saying that the club is submitting incorrect data on purpose, or that, they're just not doing their, the work that they're supposed to. It could be a glitch in the system, like, League Athletics, sometimes they will duplicate players. So we're seeing that it's getting increasingly more difficult to actually verify what we're tracking. And this past year, we had, usually we have about 9,000, closer to 10,000 players in our league. We missed the 10U deadline, so the numbers here for players is lower. But even out of the 7,100 players that were submitted, we had an 83% error rate. So that's a little concerning when it's me and Aaron and Chris verifying rosters and we're going through everything that are submitted. This, 50%, okay. But 83%, that's a lot to check. So you can see here we had 326 age violations where they did not have a petition on file. We had about 1,300 with some type of USL membership that was either a violation, expiration, wrong number, the name didn't match the membership number. We had 108 kids that were on multiple teams. Don't know how that happened. We had 816 that were playing out of area. And that could have been, maybe they just didn't fill out the form, or, maybe the club had no idea, or they moved. And then, a whopping 1,849 kids with no jersey number. And then 1,500 with no grade, or they were in the incorrect grade. Now, we don't track grade because we're not a grade-based league, but when it comes to seniors playing JV, that is a concern for us. So what does it look like once staff has a chance to look at all these errors? Well, Jeff has graciously helped Aaron and I to come up with a way to analyze all of your rosters. And I just want to emphasize that this is what it looks like when it first comes in. Many of you have already corrected this and fixed it. But just to give you an idea of but the seriousness of this topic. Steve is saying that no one is in trouble. Correct, Steve. Nobody's in trouble. This is just an honest discussion about how do we get the best data from you so that we can do our job and ensure that everybody is playing on a fair playing field.
Can I ask a question about that last slide?
Yeah, let me go back there. Go ahead.
Some of these seem pretty straightforward, as they probably come up with the registration process, but how are no jersey numbers reported? Seems like is that tracking for every game throughout the season?
Well, so we don't know who the players are when they're running around on the field, or going to and from the field, or something happens. So or even to report statistics or penalties or sportsmanship incidents. We want to make sure that the right kids are playing on the right teams. And so that's why jersey numbers are important.
Understood. My question is, you're reporting a value there. 24% is a pretty high number. And if you're going to try to attack one violation and next year see an improvement, I'm asking, how is this data being reported? Is it a cumulative reporting from every single game, and so the numbers we're seeing there are just the results of the first 3 games of this past season?
Oh no, this has nothing to do with games. These are just the actual players on a team. These are no stats, no which games they're in. These are just the rosters from the club.
Laura?
If I may speak, I think for some clubs this is more of a this is Carlos Trujillo, by the way. I think it's more of a logistical issue for some clubs. There are clubs who are handing out jerseys the morning of the first game. Right. Or kids are ordering jerseys and then they've got to swap it because it's not big enough. I think some clubs don't know their numbers, or know who's wearing what jersey until, the first Saturday. And I think that contributes to this problem. So it may be a logistical issue more than it is teams not wanting to submit numbers or not being or trying to hide something.
Correct. And that's why we said that this is what it looks like when it first comes in. Just so you guys know, everybody in this column has already corrected their jersey number issue. So nobody actually still has a flag in this column. But when it comes in the first week, if we were to play a game, I'll pick on Lama. So if we were to play a game the first week, I'd be like, hey, you have 58. But luckily, Lamo sent it in right after, I think it was like a day later, she corrected it. So this is just the initial. So I want to emphasize, nobody's still in trouble. Everyone has corrected these things.
Laura?
Yeah.
You know what? One thing that I think might help is a tutorial or a little bit of training on how to report this information or push the information using League Athletics. I think it would also help with the coaches certification. Of course, we know we need to report the things, but not all of us are very comfortable with League Athletics and how to export the information or format it before we export it, or the resources that you can use from US Lacrosse to export that information. So whether it be a live training or a video training, just showing club reps how to use the tools they have to track and report more effectively.
Okay. That's a great idea. Just taking a look at some options that the staff has we've discussed. We can keep with the same process that we've done where, like Kathy said, we give a tutorial or do a video for how to submit it via League Athletics, or we can go to option 2 where everybody is submitting it on an NCJLA roster template. And then that way we have drop downs and formatting on the template so that we know you are giving us more correct data and we're not dealing with bugs from League Athletics or, the formatting from TeamSnap to League Athletics. I know some of you guys use some different applications for registration. So do either one of these options seem better or worse for your club?
I think video is a great idea because it's, you do it one time and it posts it and we can all look at it over and over again.
Okay. Is that NJ?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Ezra from Alameda. Just, I guess a question about kind of on the ground dynamics. I think there's a lot of movement towards structuring things, and I get it, and it makes a ton of sense in theory, in terms of structuring things and trying to get rosters and schedules and so forth all kind of predetermined from the outset. But the reality is, especially for smaller clubs, I imagine for bigger clubs, like these things are so fluid. And we're grabbing jerseys from a locker and trying to get kids ready to play, and we never have exactly all the right coaches organized in exactly the right way. And so maybe it's more creating a system that works on the day, and at least for the beginning of the early part of the season as things are in flux. Hey, look, we need to have this sheet filled out, this day for this game versus standardized across. We're going to know exactly what kid's going to have what number, for the whole season on day one. I think that's just going to continue to be a mess. So is there a way to look at the question and say, like, at the game time, we need to know this so that data is accurately reflected? And I understand the importance of the issue. I'm just trying to think through how it would work for us, and it's going to be tough to have that all organized early on.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we need a better way to make those changes more fluidly, because right now you got to email Dan and then he sends it back up, and it could take a while. So that's good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem.
Hey, Laura.
Yeah.
This is MJ again. I do believe, and I'm not sure if you already have this up, but the 8U and 10U, we don't need rosters from the clubs. Isn't that right?
No, that's incorrect.
We do need rosters, but they don't have to have as much information on there. Their jersey numbers are not as important because they could be wearing a t-shirt as long as it's the same color.
Jersey numbers are not available. Sorry, not rosters, but jersey numbers.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's some other aspects. Oh, go ahead.
Laura, one quick question. This is Jeff. I think that there might be some opportunity to just sort of prioritize each, the different violations that you see coming in, and set arbitrary or specific deadlines for each, like a playing out of area or not playing in the right division is probably pretty a little more important than not having a jersey. And so understanding that the jerseys are in flux and people are scrambling to get those as soon as the season starts, maybe there's an opportunity to prioritize them and figure out which ones to tackle first before the season, and then setting dates within the season that the others need to be addressed might be a good way to go.
Yeah, we, just so everybody knows, the first thing we look at is, do we have the correct birth date, and do we have a U.S. lacrosse number, and is that U.S. lacrosse number valid through the whole season? So that's the very first thing that we tackle just as a priority. And for the most part, the clubs did a great job with that topic. We do have some other specifics with roster submissions that I'd like to get your feedback. The zip code stuff. So we're making steady progress with this. We do have the play out of area process, and many of you are using it, and it's going well. One little hiccup that we have is that we have a lot of you that share an area, and you're like, oh yeah, we share it. And then there's nothing in terms of whose zip codes or whose schools. There's nothing really written for us to follow. And luckily, some of us know your clubs really well, and we can go in and be like, okay, no, that's valid. But we're having trouble getting some of you guys to get that stuff written and to us. So before this starts to delay games and us coming back to you saying, well, we have 30 kids that are not in your area, how did they end up there? What can we do to help you get these shared areas documented?
I think I'm a notorious, this is Michelle from Gold Country. We are notorious for this because we have shared lines. Every year we take the same zip code, but it isn't notated anywhere with you all. And I don't know if there's a standard form that we can fill out. I don't know. If something generated from you all would be easier than us trying to generate that. We're not sure what to do. So if we could get something that kind of helps us with that on your end, fill in, would be awesome.
Okay.
Hi, this is Richard Yee from Santa Cruz. Back to the previous slide, and I think with the problem with the data collection and stuff, I mean, part of it is, I think, use of the tool of the League Athletics and the SI Play app. Is there any way we could, one suggestion would be like getting training, especially from SI Play on some of these issues and League Athletics, because I think some of the tools are, the app I've had issues with it, and there's like no way to get help. And, I wonder if we consider using a different vendor or have the vendor address issues with getting information, using the tools.
So to answer that question, yes, we are looking at other website platforms because League Athletics has told us that it will be supported, but they are not going to add any additional features to the website. So, and just some other issues with the website overall. We are shopping around for a new platform, but for the next season, we will still continue with League Athletics. So I think that video that you were mentioning and some more support materials for it is probably the route that we'll go till we figure out a new website to use.
Okay.
Laura,
Mm-hmm.
quick question. Colleen Polland here on the zip codes from Chico.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm in a bad connection at the lake house. So like our territory, as you know, is very broad and wide. Our next person is Yuba. There's nothing in Orville. There's nothing north of us. I mean, Gold Country is close to us. So in establishing these boundaries within our region with no clubs in it, what is your suggestion there?
So
Because we are going to grow at some point, lacrosse is taking hold in this valley, but it's going to be slow going.
So there's a couple options. You can maintain your current area that you'd like to stay in. I know some clubs are not interested in adding every single county and city next to them. They'd rather stay more local, but they're happy to support that area as they grow. In that instance, any kid that was coming from that area, you would just fill out the play out of area form, and then that way there would be a record for us to say, okay, that kid is not flagged. Or if your club would like to add those areas, you can send a request to the NCJLA board and they'll take a look at what you'd like to add in terms of a service area. We have had one club that requested to add on some zip codes in a school district temporarily until they were able to start their own club. So I would just say if anybody's in that particular situation, the best thing to do is to get a hold of myself or Steve and start the conversation of what you'd like to see your club be able to do if you're in that particular situation.
Perfect, because as you know, we're reaching out to Oroville, we're reaching out to Orland in the attempt to, have kids play under Chico at this point, but also to help them, establish their own clubs in the area. And as you know, that's something I'm willing to help other areas do up in this region. So it's just important as we grow and kids only know of us that I, really lock down those zip codes with you guys and try to help Oroville and those around me. So. Okay.
So what I'm hearing is we need some type of template or document or something to fill out from Gold Country, and then Colleen some direction on what if you have extra areas around you. Anything else?
Laura, this is Eric Boda with Folsom. So just looking for some clarity on the zip code stuff. The way I understood it, if we talked amongst the presidents and we said, yes, this is cool, we didn't need to fill out any information. Go ahead, take this kid. Yeah, we'll take this kid, and talking amongst ourselves, we could keep the NCJLA out of it. But if we're reporting on people who aren't in our zip codes, then that doesn't really jive. So is it the rule if we've got someone outside of the 95630 that we need to have that document out there?
So part of that, keep the NCJLA out of it, is that the clubs are supposed to be filling out that release or acceptance form on their own. And many of the clubs are not doing that. That form is automatic. It doesn't trigger anything with staff or the board to investigate. Those are just tracking pieces. So in your particular instance, Eric, what you're saying is there are two clubs who have their defined service areas, but they're working out how players will move. And that's totally fine. We don't want to be involved in that. We just need you to fill out those forms if they're changing clubs or playing in a different area.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are clubs notified? How soon are they notified once a violation is detected? I think a lot of the issue, or some of the issue, might be that there might be some mistakes made and they don't know about it and don't correct it until it's later. Right. Are these notifications done timely once they're detected? And I think a way to correct that would be option 2 of the ones that you proposed, like that required fields or a template that would make it easy to figure out what's required and what needs to be done.
Right, so this is a relatively new process. Last year, we did a few as they were discovered. And, we immediately go to the club president and club admin and say, hey, is this an error? Are these kids, what is the deal with these kids? And, send them the names and who they are. When we started to do this more in depth, just the sheer volume, we were about to start contacting clubs, and then COVID-19 triggered everything. And so that is also a question for you guys. If we're submitting these the second week in February, how much time would you need to correct things before we start playing games? Because right now it's about 2 weeks for staff to, have all this stuff compiled, run the validation, and then get a hold of the club admin.
I think if a kid started practicing with us in January and then we didn't get that information till February, they're not going to jump back to another club in a different zip code.
Right. That's kind of where I was like, how do we get this taken care of in the off season so that we're down to maybe like 10 kids or, something a little bit more manageable to, follow up on. But 816 is a pretty big number. And when I look at this, I'm like, but those two clubs have been working together for a really long time. So, well, I will take your feedback about creating a form that you both can fill out and send in, and hopefully that will help you with documenting those shared areas.
Yeah, sorry, just to sneak one last comment in. I guess this is Ezra again, Alameda. I guess I'm the sort of deregulation versus regulation side of the camp. It seems like that's 800 kids. That's an impossible thing for you guys to deal with. And ultimately, look, I mean, so much of the system is based on an honor code. I mean, we signed the forms at the beginning of the year saying our kids U.S. lacrosse. There are fluid relationships. I know between particularly our club and Skyline. We have kids, and we know in Alameda that play up at Skyline. Skyline has some kids that live in Oakland that play over here. I'm sure Oakland lacrosse as well. There's some overlap. So I think that it's more of an exception-based model, I would say, where you look for where there's a problem versus try to maybe mandate and regulate every aspect. Because I think people know generally where it matters. I think people would know. And I think those are conversations that maybe could be handled more like in an arbitration format versus in like a hey, you guys need to document everything, and then push education out versus try to document everything. I just find the more we have to document stuff and the more forms we got to fill out, the less it happens.
Right. So this request to be like, hey, how do we get you to document your area? That's really what this is. I don't want people to have to fill out forms for every kid that wants to move club. If Alameda, Skyline, and Oakland are sharing a particular zip code and the clubs are like, look, if a kid comes from here, that's okay. We're not going to check with one another about it because we all share. That's great. But right now, the staff doesn't have anything that documents the official area of a club's, where do they operate? Or even if I have parents who, come and say, hey, I just moved to 94535. Which clubs are in my area for me to play for? If there's 3 or 4 clubs there, it's like, okay, well, which club? I send them all 3. So it's really about documenting where our clubs operate and not so much about the rosters. So I don't want you guys to think we're going to make forms upon forms for you to fill out. That wouldn't be fun.
Understood.
Okay, if you have anything else about rosters, feel free to send that to me. Our next topic is about rosters, but it's about the demographics of them. Many of you have emailed or called and asked, what is the NCJLA going to do about diversity and inclusion and, the recent conversation of racism in our country? How does that fit with lacrosse and what we do? right now, if I were to give, any organization that was looking for our numbers and, what we do to help with those issues, I wouldn't have the data because we don't track that. Even when we do sportsmanship incidents, we don't ask for, the race or, certain demographics that people would want to look at. So I do want to highlight that right now, even though we don't track that, there are some resources that are available to clubs, and the NCJLA does have its own policy when it comes to discrimination and, racial slurs being used. And US Lacrosse has a really great toolkit here. It's the US Lacrosse Diversity and Inclusion Assessment Toolkit for Leaders. It has some great stuff for you to take a look at your organization and what you can do just to be better for the kids. So with all that said, how can, our question today is how can the NCJLA support your club with increasing diversity, recognizing those, implicit biases in our policies, and how can we remove barriers to participation for certain groups? And some further questions before I open this up. When an instance of bias or racism is claimed to have happened, do your clubs have the tools and resources to address this? And do you think that our sportsmanship incident reporting process adequately addresses that bias or perceived racism? So I do want to just, one last thing before I open it up is that, we only have so much time, and we will be having a series of meetings to address this more in depth. So with that, if you have any comments on this, the floor is open.
This is Ezra from Alameda again. Sorry to keep jumping in. I think that the issue is prevalent. I've played lacrosse in the Bay Area since high school in the 80s, and we've played, mixed race teams and been in mixed race communities my whole lacrosse journey, and it's been, had racial slurs back to when I was a JV at Berkeley High, and with guys I was playing with, and I'm sure lots of people on the call know, and it's just it's something that we can't have in the game, and or we have to continue to work aggressively to push out of the game, and I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what these kids are finding in their own communities, but if you're in a place where you feel like in your community that's a sort of acceptable part of the community, I think we have to identify that and self-identify that. Again, I don't know how much we can regulate internally. I think there's things we can do, suspensions and expulsions and education and so on, but also I think it comes down to each team having to look at its own environment and what kind of culture they're breeding.
Hi, Allison here from Oakland Lacrosse Club. And thank you, Ezra, for speaking about that and your personal experience. We see it happen a lot within our club, and I think also to, Karen's point I was reading in the chat, I think one of the things that we need to do is not always be reactive and be proactive about diversity and inclusion, and that can mean a lot of things. It could mean racial bias training for our officials. It could mean maybe providing all of our club presidents, everyone on this call, down to our coaches, with some proactive training to promote inclusion in the sport, right before anything happens. And even to the extent of outlining for kids what would be the consequences if they were to say something. It's so often these things happen out of the earshot of all of us, and it's important to remember that. So we need to not only promote it so that our kids can all be the leaders of this anti-racism, but we also need to have the tools to address it and be prepared before it happens to know how we would do that. And I think the sportsmanship incident reporting process is important and needs to be in place for incidences that do happen. But I think when it comes to addressing racism, we need a more restorative practice that maybe just complements the one we have now. I'm not saying replace it, but maybe when specific racism is happening, one, we need to believe it. There's not going to be proof if it's a he said, she said thing. So we need to believe it, and we need to address it quickly and with a restorative framework, which is not about punishing anybody, about us all getting to a open conversation about the harm that was done, and how we can repair that relationship, and we can repair the wonderful culture and sport that is lacrosse. It's a beautiful sport that really brings people together. And so when any racism happens, it's hurting our whole sport. It's hurting everyone who's a part of it. And we need to make sure that we repair that. And if that's the focus when these things happen, then I think we're all going to be in a better place to then include more diverse people on our roster, right? But we have to kind of make that culture first.
Hi, this is MJ. I'm on the NCGLA board. I totally agree. And I was just thinking, like, maybe a video with like youth athletes talking to youth athletes even about this, and some kids that maybe have been called this and how it impacts them, and the seriousness of, what I think Positive Coaching Alliance does a really good job with some of their videos. But maybe it's a video that we put together, or US Lacrosse has, that is kind of kids talking to other kids about how damaging this is.
This is Richard again. I would agree, and I think it comes down to the organizations to emphasize, each club to emphasize, to the parents especially, and and down through the coaches to the kids about this, our stance on this issue, and that racism won't be tolerated, and this is the consequence, not just to the kids, but to the parents, in the stands and stuff, and also for all the different organizations to help think about inclusion and growing the sport through diversity and working with underserved communities.
This is Kathy. I was going to switch gear a little bit into the diversity of our clubs. Sacramento Lacrosse spends a lot of time and energy into the inclusion and diversity component. We have our practice fields and game fields in one of the communities, probably one of the lowest income communities in the area, and do a lot of outreach into the Title I schools. And even I would venture to say that we're in the Sacramento area, probably one of the most diverse clubs. And still, I have such a hard time calling our teams diverse. It's still really not as much as I would like to. And even though the energy that we put into it, I'm still looking for ways to include more diversity. And we have these kids that, even though we're telling them we can loan you equipment, and don't fret about the registration, and we'll help you, and they want to, and we still have parents that either aren't involved or can't be involved. Their work schedules, they don't have cars. We let kids play on different teams because they simply can't get to practice. We just like bend over backwards to try to accommodate, and still it's so hard to increase the diversity of our teams. So I'm always looking for new suggestions there. And then the other thing is to try to increase the diversity of our representatives and our coaches, so that kids see, kids want to play with people who look like them, and have coaches that look like them, if they can at least relate. So I'm even going to parents who parents of different race to not even be a coach, but just to be a leader on the team, assist the coach, be out there, just so that kids can see more diversity and feel more welcomed. But I'm still just having such a hard time. So I don't know, any recommendations on, you know, reaching more kids or making them feel comfortable? I mean, we're out there in the diversest parts of the area, and still these kids are like, well, I can't play that, it costs too much, I don't know what I'm doing, my parents won't pay for that, you know, just, it's still so hard.
Hi guys, this is Willie from Alameda Lacrosse, and I just wanted to piggyback off of what Allison had talked about. How I think the idea, I really liked how she put it, where it's not that, you know, we need to supplant what the NCJLA is doing in terms of the critical incident reports and making sure folks have consequences when they're, you know, doing something that shouldn't be done. But I think in addition to just emphasizing that it's wrong to be racist, I think it's really important to emphasize that it's right to be anti-racist in a positive manner, right? And I think this is a moment in time where the NCGLA can show some leadership to really make that a really important platform to put out a positive position in terms of anti-racism and inclusion and diversity.
This is Karen, Firehawks, and this issue is kind of personal to me because I'm one of those, I'm biracial, and I've had a hard time coming up through sport. And one of the things that I think has happened through my life is that sometimes people don't say something or do something because they don't think anything's going to be done about it, or they don't think somebody's going to believe them, or they don't think that it's a big enough issue. And in my case, I was like, I'm strong enough, I don't care, and I just let things roll off. So I think for the NCGLA to be able to make people feel like it matters, or make kids or parents feel like it really matters, is important.
This is Derek. I played lacrosse back in the 80s on the East Coast out on Long Island, and I faced this pretty much every game. And, you know, back then the game was a bit more physical, and quite frankly, there were different ways that those things were resolved. You know, these years on, my son is now playing, and he's still, you know, running into the same issue. So there were a lot of things that were said today that I think really resonate with me, and I think, you know, the NCJLA coming out and proactively, you know, making a statement as to what, you know, what the stance is. Also, you know, more positively, really endorsing anti-racism and why the sport needs to be so inclusive. There are a lot of kids in, you know, that I talk to, and I know that a lot of the kids want to play because they do see somebody who looks like them out on the field, either coaching or playing. It's very, very intimidating when you go out on the field and you're the only one. You don't see anybody that looks like you. You don't feel like you have any support when you look on the sidelines or in the stands. And if you've never been in that situation, it's really, unless you've been in that situation, it's really hard to explain exactly how it feels. But as you can see what's going on in the country, there are a lot of people who are, even though they don't understand exactly how it feels to be that way, they're really coming on board and really trying and to be an ally with changing the culture. And I would really endorse, you know, the NCJLA taking a proactive step. I'm doing everything I can to increase diversity. I know that there are a lot of other coaches that are doing the same. but we really need to keep on pressing and be positive about this, reaching out into the community. There have been several situations where it's been more subtle. I've gone down the line shaking hands after a game, and there are players on the other teams that we've played even in the last couple of years that have not shaken my hand, that they've gotten to my hand and they've gone over my hand or under my hand. And I've gone over right after the game and spoken to the coach and let them know what's happened, and hopefully that was addressed on with that team at that time. So I think if we stop these little, if we stop these issues right then, nip it in the bud, actually have more information and more positive ways to really talk to the kids. I think the idea of having a video of kids talking to kids, that's really powerful because they take it differently and they accept it more. And I think that all much of what was said needs to be distilled down into a strategy that the league should be able to put forward if we really want to continue to grow the game, and also not to lose the players that are currently in it, because I have conversations with my son all the time, and a lot of times he's never come to the point of saying he doesn't want to play, but he's a good player. But we deal with other things other than skill and IQ that a lot of people don't really recognize, and it takes a lot to be mentally strong to continue to go out there, especially when you just feel like you're always the only one. So whatever the league can do to positively back that and to embrace inclusion and anti-racism would be the way to go to continue to grow this sport.
And I would just like to add just the previous comments and really bring up some of the seriousness of it. From Oakland lacrosse perspective, we've been in the league since 2013, and every year we've had some sort of racist incident, ranging from people at our home field saying, I'm going to be robbed in Oakland. The N-word has been dropped to our kids multiple times. And a bunch of other, serious things along those lines. And, I really wanted to kind of speak to that. And I think one of the reasons why we haven't brought it up to the NCGLA as much is to what Allison said, is that when we would bring it up with the other teams and immediately teams would get defensive and get into that like punishment mode. And so because there was nowhere place to have dialogue about it, from our end, we want to have discussions about it and have kids learn from it. It felt like there wasn't really a place to go. So I think in moving forward, beyond the punishment part, there's that important part about like, how is there a dialogue about it if something happens? But for our kids, and we recently had a meeting about it with our kids who brought it up in a recent discussion we had. But, incidents that happened 2 or 3 years ago, impact our kids heavily.
All right, guys.
This is, I can add one more thing. This is Brian from Diablo Scorpions Lacrosse.
Yep.
We and just as I'm sure all of you hold meetings, at the start of the season, and you have important topics, whether it's referees coming in or your boys and girls breakouts. I just want to say that as a club, I'm the club president. We will be making this topic, just as important as any other topic, this season and moving forward. And I invite other clubs to do that too. I looked on the site just now on the diversity and inclusion, the assessment, the toolkits that they have. It's a lot of stuff, and it's hard to say, not any tool is going to fit each club. It's not a one size fits all. You're going to have to pick whatever tools you have there and then address it with your club. And, we'll definitely be in open communication to the NCJLA and let them know what we're doing as a club. And I just invite all the other clubs to do the same. And I think that's one step we can all take as an organization to address this issue.
And
All right.
sorry, Laura.
Who is that?
It's Michelle from Gold Country.
Go ahead.
I would definitely, I mean, I hear the importance, and I'm certainly on board with whatever the NCJLA is willing to put out there as far as restorative practice and education. And I just want to speak very frankly that in Nevada County, we are one of the, if not the whitest county in the state of California. So I want to be very upfront with the fact that we need to be educated as far as how to be pushing the, you know, the policies and protocols out there and the education. So we're very interested in having some kind of curriculum or videos or whatever, but I want to make sure that we don't have anyone that's, you know, diversity on our board, coaches, very few players, if any. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing as we head out of our county, you know, being respectful.
That's a good point. Hey guys, I know we could talk about this for a really long time, but it's already 9:40. So if there's something very pressing that you would like to have contribute to this, feel free to put it in the chat or send us a separate email. I think the key things that we've gathered from this point of our discussion is that we need a task force, you know, players, club leaders, officials, you know, to kind of tackle this, and then some expert help with having the discussions. I think Marco and Karen made a great point in the chat about, you know, we've got to provide people who have experience with this and can make sure that it's a positive discussion. We don't want it going the wrong way or people feeling unprepared to talk about this. And then, you know, creating some videos and curating some resources that help clubs and give them some tools. So I'll be sending a follow-up directly related to this topic, just to make sure that we keep the conversation going and that we get some progress made pretty quickly. So with that, the next topic for today, coaches certification. I hate to go from something so serious and important to, you know, our coaches certification, but it is something that as club leaders, you guys have said is frustrating for you right now. The most pressing thing is the 90-minute athlete certification course that we briefly touched on at the beginning of the meeting. Some suggestions for the future. So after looking at the curriculum of the athlete safety course, it does have the curriculum from Positive Coaching Alliance embedded in that. So we would be in favor of removing that unless some clubs are very passionate that it should still be separate. And then also embedded in the curriculum of the athlete safety course is physical safety, which includes concussion prevention, education, certification. So moving forward for the next season, we would remove those two separate certifications for your coaches to go get. We would also be categorizing all the US Lacrosse membership items under that one to-do list. That's the background check and the athlete safety course. So are there any feedback or suggestions, or are you in favor of this move for your coach's certification?
Very much in favor of this one. Anything that we can do to consolidate the number of disparate requirements is a good thing.
Okay, I see it looks like El Dorado Hills, Stephanie is in favor of this as well as Tomahawks, Skyline. Okay. All righty, well, we'll keep going with that. The master calendar. So a lot of you have chimed in, why, oh, why must we do our scheduling in December? Everybody's trying to pay for Christmas or what have you, and can we move this? I think for the past 5 years, probably even while I was just on the board, since 2013, we've been discussing this. So in light of COVID-19 and some of the uncertainties there, we're looking at possibly moving the team registration date to the first Friday in January for B and youth levels. I want to be clear that A and high school would still be in December. The feedback has been that those teams are set and known, and they need that time to get those schedules situated. We'd also hold the league-wide scheduling the second Saturday in January. We would still have the same date of entering schedules the third Sunday in January. We would also be looking at moving the season start date back by 1 week, just to give you guys some of these anticipated benefits, which are gives additional time for your parents to pay registration fees. And Dan and I both know that most of you send in your games the third week of January. So I don't know what you guys do in December, but it's not entered games for the majority of you. Several of your clubs also have said that you would know your fields in January. It'd give you some time to recruit kids and some more options for fields with daylight savings time. So those are some of the options there. And just a little summary. If we did move the start of the season, the end of the season would move to, it would still stay the same dates. So let me I'm going to go back here. Let's break this up. So for scheduling and team registration, is there anything here that your club is like, this is awesome, thank God, or this is not going to work for us?
This is Greg from Fremont Lacrosse. I would say, yes, this is awesome. Thank God. Pushing the registration back specifically. And as long as we keep an openness for clubs to do some of their own scheduling, they can get a head start maybe, even if it was pushed back. I know that that specific day is helpful for many, but I think if there's a running start as well, that's not going to make a big conflict for people to get their scheduling done in January. So
okay,
heavily support this.
Hi, this is Richard in Santa Cruz again. In our experience, I believe in an area that has a lot of competition for fields, I just want to caution that moving everything back and having some organizations wait till later to do the scheduling, it might impact being able to secure fields for games. We had a very difficult time this year competing with certain fields because of lack of all-weather turf fields in the winter, and I think just to make sure that the downside of moving things back, if people aren't proactive, they could find themselves having difficulty scheduling games. But we're fine with moving it back because we typically do it early.
I was going to say, I've already got 5 people in the chat that are saying yes. So,
yeah.
If you need time to take this back to your scheduler and have them look at it, that's great. We are looking at some options to make entering your games easier, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But for the most part, this seems to be something that your clubs would be in favor of. So if you could get any additional feedback to me, probably within the next 2 weeks, that would be awesome.
Hey, Laura, it's Kelly French. Could I ask a clarification question?
Yeah.
You mentioned in high school timeline wouldn't change. Would the scheduling begin for the A levels and high school in December, or would it begin that Saturday, the second Saturday in January?
It'd be the same in December, their same timeline.
So the online format platform, it would be in December for A in high school, so they would get started, and then the rest of scheduling would start second Saturday. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
The feedback that and correct me if I'm wrong, the feedback that I've had is that those teams have more, there's less people to play, and so there's more finagling that needs to happen in order to find dates to play, and especially with COVID-19 and not quite sure how far people will be able to travel, they would need more time to figure that out.
I have a question.
Sure.
With potential budget cuts to high schools and sports programs, sometimes there's a difficulty with some of the high school clubs to continue as part of, like, say, CIF. And we've had some late folks, late kids want to come and join because then they can join the NCGLA clubs. So any consideration for maybe that being something as we see going into the spring process, that there might not be, you know, the same availability of some of the newer programs to sustain themselves, and there might be an influx of players sort of late, you know, sort of December and January, and just want to kind of put that on the radar because that happened a little bit this year.
So we always accept late registration for teams. The problem with that is that you're not guaranteed the exact, you know, as many games as you would like to get because your opponents might have a full schedule. So if a club does find themselves in that situation where the CIF program gets cut and, you know, you've got all these kids looking for a place to play, you most certainly can form a high school team. If any of the high school coaches are on here or schedulers, they are always looking for more opponents. So I don't see that being a problem for the NCGLA to accommodate.
Right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so looking at the rest of the master calendar, some other issues that were brought up by some of the clubs was that, you know, we're getting too big to be doing, you know, it's one central location or just two. You know, is it possible to make more regional championships and then move to a league championship? So planning for next season, you know, youth and B levels, they could have a regional tournament, and then that, you know, regional tournament champion would then go to the league-wide championship at one central location. A and high school levels kind of already have that pathway, so there would be no changes for them. You know, unless we have a huge influx in the A and high school levels, most of them carry less than 15 teams in them. So this is also kind of taking into consideration some of the, you know, COVID-19 recommendations of playing more locally. I want to emphasize that, you know, we're playing in the spring. Some of you may be getting ready to play this fall for your fall ball. You know, that's going to be up to your local public health officials. But we are looking at the spring and what that, you know, what would be those guidelines in terms of COVID-19. So what does it look like? We would have weekends for each region to have their flighted tournament. Luckily, over the past 5 years, we've been developing these venues, you know, the Petaluma Community Fields, Menlo Atherton High School, Bartholomew Sports Complex. You know, all of these venues we have good working relationships with them, and we've run this plan by them, and they're in support of it. So any thoughts or comments on this? I see there's a question from Karen about the COVID-19 considerations. It's one of those huge unknowns. Right now, we're seeing recommendations that teams play within their county or within their city. Most of you have clubs that are formed, you know, within a county. I think there's only a few of us that have zip codes or school districts that cross county lines. So we're looking at more of a like 20 to 30 mile radius for a region. So. Any thoughts on this, or I'm getting a couple in the chat? I'm getting some, this is good, we're in support. Okay, all right.
Question for you, Laura.
Sure.
This is Dominic, Folsom Lacrosse. When you say leagues, right, like separate leagues, so are you saying like my club would be in the north or the southeast region, right? Does that mean we no longer play teams from like the northwest or the southwest?
No, so, well, no, complicated question. So right now with COVID-19, they're not recommending that your team would play somebody from the Northwest, right? Like if you were going to try to play Novato, for example, they would not recommend that because you're traveling pretty far. If we're in phase 4 or phase 5, that would be more reasonable. We encourage teams to play their conference or in their region, but they are free to schedule with teams outside of that. So, you know, we want to give you guys flexibility with building a schedule that you want. What we're talking about here is just what we would offer in terms of your.
Hi, my love.
But the one thing with that on the A and high school level is that Sacramento region has 2 or 3 A teams at the 14 or 12, and most of the rest of the A teams are on the West Coast.
Yeah, so we are not proposing any changes to how A and high school are structured with conference formation, with, you know, requirements. You know, like I said just a few minutes ago, you guys are so small that you basically have to play every team in your area, or, you know, even not in your area, in the league. Sorry, let me correct that. So there's no changes being proposed to that format at this time.
So A and high school will still stay with this is your conference, you play these guys, you play the other guys that are out of conference to get a full schedule. Okay.
Yep.
Hey, Laura,
thank you.
One quick question, I guess. I'm in favor of this format. I do like it. Are the locations set in stone there? Is that just a recommendation?
No, they're not set in stone. You know, when we look at the size of the teams, you know, this is what we've been working on. There's been some people who've mentioned some other fields that are being built and their city is, you know, letting them use. But yeah, if another facility opens up that would work better, yeah, we're totally open to using that.
Because I'll just give a little thumb down to Treasure Island for the Central West. That's just, you know, all the issues that we have there.
Well, we can't have food trucks at Diablo Vista Middle School, so, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, if you have some more thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. You know, we are growing and we want to make sure that we're giving, you know, offering events for all of your teams and that they're convenient and they have fun at them. So please, if you have any other thoughts, send them to myself or Steve. All right, training support. So as club leaders, we try to offer some 3 key areas to help you with training your volunteers or with getting people certified or completing certain tasks. First one is schedulers training and requirements. This year, we had a schedulers test that was a little more in depth. Any thoughts on schedulers trainings? Okay, coaches rules tests. We now make those so that they are more closely aligned with what a coach in the NCJLA will need to know, not necessarily, you know, an FHS test or US Lacrosse test.
Just want to give big kudos on that one. Made a big difference this year to have that integrated into USL and to be specific to the NCJLA. So whoever made that happen, thank you very, very much.
Our club president manual we'll talk a little bit more about in the regional session. But our YouTube videos, I've heard so far you guys would like to have something in terms of how to use league athletics for rosters, and then a video that was focused on the diversity and inclusion section that we just had a little bit ago. Any other videos that your club would be looking for? All right. So now we've been participating with the U.S. Lacrosse Safe Return to Play. I'm sure most of you have seen the guidelines that have come out. It's a lot of information, and we are working very hard to figure out how that translates into what your clubs will need to do in the spring. There's some other resources here when I send out the slides in order to, get your club up and running. One of the key things I want to emphasize is that there's a lot of words for stages, phases. We're in this part of reopening, we're not. As we go through this, for us, if a state or county is in phase 1, essentially it's individual lacrosse. If it's phase 2 that your county is in, that means you're doing your own inter-club activities if you choose to do so. Phase 3 would be clubs in close proximity may practice or scrimmage each other. Phase 4 is hopefully where we will be for the spring, where we have league-wide modified game schedules and events in addition to the activities of phase 2 and 3. And fingers crossed, we might be in phase 5 for the spring or with a vaccine and treatment present. So just to reference that. So what are some of the things that your club admin should be thinking about before we start our season? Requiring a preparation or pre-participation physical exam or test results. Conducting some type of pre-participation screening and record keeping for each team. Policy for frequent disinfecting and providing additional sanitation. Policies to reduce large amounts of participants and ensure social distancing. Club admins would have to provide education and signage to promote that healthy hygiene and risk of exposure. And then ensuring that we're using adequate space during practices and games for social distancing. Now, I want to emphasize, we will have detailed information for you on exactly what to do. But right now we're just trying to prep you and inform you of the work that's being done. So the pre-participation physical exam, so far we've seen some great physical exams come from CIF that screen participants and make sure that they've signed all their waivers. And US Lacrosse has developed a great return to play waiver focused on COVID-19 that we think the clubs should use. And then we are working on some hold harmless agreements, some descriptions of refund policies to help your clubs, and some templates for collecting those attendance sheets and screening questions. And then most recently, we've seen this role of safety manager referenced, and this person would be recording all screening results, attendance sheets, scheduling volunteers, and the primary contact for health officials. Any club admins have some comments on this? I know some of you have been using the same, registration process and, with slight tweaks each year. But this is what we're seeing is what would need to be added to that registration process.
Laura, this is Eric Smith.
Yeah.
Are these going to be mandates, recommendations, a mix? Otherwise, it's going to get pretty overwhelming, and
oh yeah,
our volunteers is slim as it is, and we're going to overwhelm a lot of people.
Right. That is my feedback to many of the organizations that I speak with. I'm like, okay, this is beyond a volunteer's, bandwidth. This is now someone that a club would need to have doing this for them. And just hearing you say that is more affirmation that I need to go back to them and say, this might be too much. But right now, this is what's being recommended.
This is Stephanie with El Dorado Hills Lacrosse. Yeah, my concern with manager would be that, would they be willing to take on the liability if somehow someone's missing their paperwork? As a volunteer position, that could be a lot of liability on one individual.
Yeah, that's a good point, Stephanie.
So if we're under the umbrella of U.S. Lacrosse and being required to have U.S. Lacrosse numbers, why couldn't it be U.S. Lacrosse creates a form or some requirement that covers all of this? It's really hard for volunteers to, now you're asking each club to have an authority to monitor all of this. We already do that with U.S. Lacrosse. We're able to get fails because of insurance for U.S. Lacrosse. So my recommendation is, I don't see how this is going to work from club to club to club. Just my points.
Thanks, Snipper. Okay.
Laura, this is Derek. Is there any issue around HIPAA with physical exams and COVID-19 test results?
Yes, so that is on the next agenda for the Safe Return to Play task force that we're serving on. We've asked, what specifically for HIPAA do we need to have signed off or released? How do we protect these volunteers? We really don't want to collect anything more than, their name, that they've answered the screening questions, and their temperature. We don't want to do that. So we're waiting on that, but that's definitely high on my list of what does HIPAA require.
And the other question I have is that the COVID-19 test results, is that only a one-time test, or is that at the beginning during the registration process? Because
yes, so,
it doesn't mean that you can't test positive later.
So that would be the initial screening. That was in one of the NFHS papers, their recommendations of things that clubs could do or schools could do. It wasn't required. So these are some of the examples. This is from the NFHS guidelines that came out, just the coaches monitoring form. It's just like a basic attendance sheet. So this is the safety manager. I'd encourage you to go to the US Lacrosse website. Lynn just put the link in the chat. That PDF at the very end has all the possible responsibilities of the safety manager. As a league, we can take those best practices and decide what works best for us. So I'd really encourage you guys to read that document. Some other items that if you're starting to have some club activities, you might be seeing requests for the frequent disinfecting. CDC put out a great PDF for us to use, so don't feel like your club needs to come up with that. Some of the items to clean, just think of it as you're cleaning up all the equipment before you put it back in the storage shed. we are looking at some discounts on these cleaning supplies for you guys, in the season, and most certainly at any NCGLA event, we'll be taking care of this for you. Some policies that people have thrown out. So I'm going to put all of these up here for you guys. Are any of these, a big flag for your club? You're like, we definitely would not want to see this as part of our spring season.
The face mask thing, even with little things that have happened so far, not sure where that falls in terms of participation, but I don't know about you guys. It's tough to get kids to wear face masks.
Oh yeah.
But so I just realistically, I think we have to come up with policies that work in the real world. You get 3 kids together, they don't stay 6 feet apart. They don't wear face masks. They cluster up, and it's just the reality.
Yep.
Yeah, and Laura, this is Brian Cross. I mean, what I'd add, like, some of these things make sense if we were basketball indoors, but it's complete overkill for an outdoor sport. Even the disinfecting, we know at this point that you're not going to get sick from touching a lacrosse ball. I mean, it's really goes beyond anything that is scientifically founded, and I hope that by the time we get to our season that all of that will be more well known. But just things, even masks, as long as you can stay spread out, if you're in an outdoor space like we are, the risk is just not there.
I'm really glad to hear this from you guys. I don't want to assume when I go to these meetings, so this is good feedback. In terms of scheduling, so there's been some concern about, grouping a lot of people together, are any of these things here something that you're like, oh, that might help, or, no, that really wouldn't work for us?
Hey, Laura, this is Eric. I kind of agree with Brian that I think other than to remind people, this stuff shouldn't be our responsibility. It's total overkill, and asking the clubs to do a lot of this stuff, it's going to start killing us, just because I'm almost at the point of overwhelmed. I don't want to deal. My kids are at the point where, they only have 1 or 2 years left anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I'm just going to bag the whole thing if it gets too much.
Agreed.
Yeah, I can't speak for Alameda. Derek can speak for Alameda as a club, but I think we set guidelines, we put some parameters out. But ultimately, either you want to take the chance, and there's a risk reward scenario for everybody and everything, and we say, hey, look, this is our policy. But I wouldn't want to be formally on the hook for a lot of this stuff, just for lots of reasons.
Right. Okay. Well, that's
right. And Colleen from Chico, there's another thing that's going to happen here is we're going to get mandates coming down from the school districts of what we can and cannot do, and it's just a lot for clubs in general with our staffing to accommodate all this. And you would think they would mirror each other, but I mean, this is, it's going to be interesting to see what all our school districts have to say soon enough.
Hey, this is Steve chiming in here. A lot of what you're seeing is a lot of what we've learned, and we're certainly going to take into consideration what works for our league. This is how we've operated in the past. There's a lot of other issues that have come up, but we've got to remember, we're all volunteers, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got. And the bottom line is we have to figure out how to play lacrosse in the spring. A lot of it is unknown right now, but we've got very smart people working on what's going to work. And I just want to, again, commend everyone for chiming in. We brought all these materials to put in front of you for the purpose of discussion. So it's working, and we are going to figure out how we can play in the spring. So as Laura has said, if you've got something that comes to mind, particularly in the risk management area, just send it to it, because we have all summer to figure this out, and we're going to do everything that we can to make it as easy as possible to get back on the field. A lot's unknown right now, but we're doing the best we can with what we got, and we are moving forward with some very good resources.
So this slide here, just basically want to let you guys know that if you are getting ready to do camps or something before we release some official guidance, please don't go making signs. There are a ton of resources for you and that are pre-made that you can put up, or your venue might already have up. And I'll be putting those on the COVID-19 page on the NCJLA website. The spacing, you know, we're looking at, you know, just putting some extra space between fields. Most of you already do this, so this wouldn't be a big change for you. I would need maybe some more funding for cones or, you know, field lines, but I think our league could, you know, adapt to this pretty quickly.
Laura?
Yes.
I had a specific question about, I've seen the masks or the visors that attach to helmets, but I know those are, traditionally visors are illegal for lacrosse helmets. Is there going, maybe Mike knows, is that something that they're going to allow or not allow during games?
Yeah, there's still some major discussions with that. I haven't seen anybody that is totally in favor of it. I think it's safe to say that that probably will not take hold.
This is Carlos talking. Just speaking from the view of other sports, football has the same rule. You can't wear visors. And as soon as the visors were made, within 48 hours, they approved them for play in college and high school football games. I think if we get to the point where it's a consideration, they're going to approve it so that people can wear them. I don't think they're going to. I think the reasons for not wearing visors or the reasons for wearing visors may end up outweighing those to not do them, and they'll just approve them instantaneously once the time comes.
Interesting. Thanks.
So these are the areas that we're tackling right now. Later on in the regional sessions and the boys and girls sessions, we'll talk about actual rules of play that could be modified to help with complying with COVID-19 restrictions. But this is really focused on your club admin and, you know, supports for that. I did put a link in the let's see here on the last slide that we have. I'll put it in the chat right before we end the meeting. But I do appreciate all of your feedback regarding this. And I know some of you are very anxious to offer summer and fall programs. And I'll work, you know, as much as I can to make sure that we get something in front of the board for them to approve and for you to use. So with that, I will, this is the end of the session. Are there any other topics or items to be discussed?
Dave Lang here, Granite Bay Lacrosse. Can you hear me okay?
Kind of low.
Okay. So one thing that we mentioned videos, one thing that would be really helpful, every year you try to decide whether or not to go A, be veteran, be rookie. I would love if there was a way to somehow put examples of gameplay at each level for, you know, 14A boys, veteran, you know, 14 veteran boys, rookie boys, the same with girls. That way it's nice because you can take a look and see what examples of gameplay look like. And sometimes it helps internally for us to talk to other coaches, have a discussion of which level would be appropriate for you to be at. So that's just a thought. If it would be, I spent a lot of time searching the internet looking for examples of representative gameplay, particularly going up to a new level. But I want to see what you guys think.
I think that's great. We just got to get some game footage for you.
One along those lines, maybe it's going to be discussed later. Has there ever been a thought about splitting the B vet into like a B plus and a B minus? Because that is the toughest one, right? You know an A team when you see it, you know a rookie team. B vet, I mean, we've had games where we've blown people out. We've had games where, you know, we've gotten completely annihilated by what was really an A team. So is 3 the right number?
This is Carlos. I think we have tried on the board in a variety of ways to try to hold people accountable for, playing down, to try and, rack up wins. I mean, we have teams in the league who play rookie that way. They've got 3 A players, 8 B players, and 8 rookies, and they call themselves a rookie team because of the rookies. But those kids don't get on the field till they're up by 15 goals. So it's ultimately, if somebody can come up with a way to hold people accountable for that, then we would love to hear it. But I think it's been and continues to be difficult.
Okay. It just seems like there's this tier of B team that drops down from A, and and they just there's this set, right? And they kind of float up and down, and it can't be fun for those kids either. So I just don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's been a challenge for us, since for as long as I've been involved in how to properly place your team so that the kids do have the best possible playing experience. We talk about that certainly at the board level, and sort of any feedback that we can get from you with regard to that area would be huge, because again, our ultimate goal is to provide the best possible lacrosse experience for everyone involved. Laura, can you hit the next slide? And this next slide is my shameless, nope, going the wrong way. my shameless plea for volunteers and participation at the board level. We are going into the part of sort of the board calendar where we are beginning to form the season, and of course we take nominations for board members. This is also the time to get any sort of substantial change into our operations guide or potentially our bylaws. You would need to start that process now. We will be looking to fill 4, possibly 5 board seats coming up this year. So if you are interested in joining the board, please, contact Laura or me and let me know, that you are interested. We're also always looking for commissioners to help us with regional play and age-based play as well. I've been on the board for 10 years, and it's a wonderful experience. It does get you very involved with the understanding of what's going on, and we are looking for new people, some new blood on the board. I find that would be very helpful as we grow. So we are going into a break period right now. Laura, how long do you want the break to be?
We've got about 5 minutes until the next regional meetings start.
Okay, so we'll pick up again probably at 10:30. Yeah. And so Laura, can we just quickly go over sort of what the logistics are for participating in the regional portion?
Right. So on the NCJLA website, there are links to, there's a PDF under the club administrators tab of all the meeting links for whichever reason you would like to participate in. We are a little bit behind, but the Northeast and Southeast Conference clubs will be session A, and the link for that meeting is under the club administrators tab, or it's been emailed to you. And then at the same time will be the Southwest Conference clubs, that will be session B. So, and I just want to emphasize those people in the chat that are concerned about determining playing levels. We're going to discuss that a little bit in the regional session and in the boys and girls session. So we'll have some additional time to get your thoughts on it.
So we're going into a break. We're picking up again at 10:30. Some of you might actually be back on at 12:30 if you want to participate in that region. But this ends the sort of the league-wide session. Thank you all very much for participating. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, and just sort of like everybody else, looking forward to getting back onto the field. So thank you very much, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you.
Hey, Ezra.
Yo, what group are we in?
I don't know how to exit. Oh, here we go.